Welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. I'm Katherine Goldberg. Today, we're joined by Chase Warner of Triangle Seeds. If you guys watched last week, you'll know that Chase and I built my very first grow tent, which was awesome. However, we have a lot of questions from the community, and I wanted to sit down with Chase and just ask him some more of the basics before we even get started. So, Chase is our Yoda.
Thank you.
If you have questions, put them in the comments. We'll do an ask him anything and we'll answer. But before we even start with that, we can grow outdoors under the sun, or we can grow indoors.
Correct.
Why would someone choose one over the other? Or what are some things that the listeners might want to consider when they're making that choice?
Sure. So when you're considering outdoor versus indoor, at a kind of very shallow layer, there's what is legal in your state. That's kind of one of the considerations. Is some states only allow you to do indoor grow. So there you're kind of like obviously going to go indoor. If you have the opportunity to grow outdoor, it's less equipment. It's less energy. So, if you have the opportunity to grow outdoor, you should strongly consider it. That's kind of the route where it's more of traditional gardening in a sense. You could do raised beds, you could do containers. The states that allow home grow outside, usually you have to be like inside of a fenced area, or so basically just check your laws where you are. But the nice thing about growing outdoors is you don't have to completely be responsible for controlling the environment. You're going to kind of take what nature gives you. On the other hand, if you want to go indoors or you have to go indoors, the tricky part there is that you're responsible for replicating the natural environment. So you're not just worrying about the watering and the fertilizing of the plant and when to harvest. You're responsible for controlling the temperature and the airflow and the humidity, which in an outdoor setting, you don't have to control that. You have to deal with your local climate, your local weather. But indoors, you're taking on that role of creating the environment. It's similar if anyone has ever tried with like aquariums, like a reef tank, a saltwater tank. You're replicating an incredibly complex natural system. And so that kind of presents some challenges. It's ultimate control, but that control is also kind of a responsibility.
Can someone grow outdoors theoretically all year round if they live somewhere like Los Angeles where there's not going to be snow? Or are there only certain months where we can consider growing outdoors?
Sure. So basically outdoors, what stops you from growing is frost. And so obviously there are places in the United States that don't get frost or rarely get frost. So in those places you could grow year round. You've got to consider the type of seed you're growing. Most of those places you're going to need to grow what's called an autoflowering plant, because your day length will be too short for a traditional like photoperiodic seed, which we'll get into. But yeah, so in certain parts of the country you can grow outdoors all year.
Do you need direct sun to grow outdoors, or can it just be sunny?
You kind of want at least 6 hours of direct sun.
Okay.
That's kind of a minimum. If you're going to go outside, you basically want to you want to watch the sun for a few days, say in your backyard or on your patio, and classically you want it to be a south facing in most of the United States, southern exposure. That'll increase the amount of sun you get, and you kind of just want to watch your yard for where the sun hits the longest. And there would be that spot in your yard you get the most sun. If you could put your container anywhere, you put it there. But if you have a completely shaded backyard, you're going to be fighting a lack of sunlight. So
Okay.
yeah, so generally it's similar with tomatoes, honestly. 6 hours of direct sun is really what you're shooting for.
Okay.
And then aside from the outdoor-indoor conversation, there's a greenhouse or a hoop house covering, but that's probably going too deep for today's purposes.
Okay, we'll get into that.
We can get into that, yeah.
So based on my location, I don't have those 6 hours of direct sunlight.
Okay.
I'm also in a pretty small apartment. So I have opted to grow inside in a small tent so I can control everything. Am I losing anything by not using the sun and by using LED lights? Like, can you taste the difference in the flower? Not that that's a bad thing, but I'm just curious.
You could.
Okay.
You could, because basically no grow light technology, no matter how good it is, replicates the sun. That's the goal of all grow lights.
Seriously, yeah.
And so the reality is that the incredible spectrum the sun puts off is going to stress the plant in certain ways to create, terpene production and sulfurs and esters and a bunch of other things that contribute to the smell and the effect of the flower.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean you can't grow great flower indoors with a grow light.
Why do some people prefer to grow indoors rather than outdoors?
Control, if you want a steady supply and you don't happen to live in the relatively small parts, most places in the US, you have a grow season. It's going to start sometime in the spring, you're going to grow the plant through the summer, and you're going to harvest in early to mid fall. And so if you want to produce, a quarter, whatever amount you want to produce, if you want to produce it every 2 months, you want to go indoors. The thing is, when you grow outdoors, you can do some things like plant autoflowers early to get like a midsummer crop, and then short and full season photo periods to kind of get staggered crops. But you're going to be dealing with a bunch of flower in one particular part of the year, and then trying to make that last. If you want fresh flower continually, or if you just enjoy the hobby. Frankly, I used to live in a colder climate, and going into a warm grow room in the middle of January when there's no leaves on the trees outside is really nice. But that would be the reason, I think, for steady supply, control. It's indoor growing. If you're choosing indoor, you almost kind of want to have some desire to nerd out a little bit on the equipment and the dialing of the environment and the experimentation. Outdoors, you can experiment too. You keep your journal, because if you don't take notes, you can never improve. You don't know what you did. But it's a longer time scale. You can learn faster. You can do 5 crops indoors in a year, where in some parts of the country you can just basically have a season to grow. Okay.
So, yeah. And I would recommend, from my limited knowledge, do one plant outside. It's a delight. Do an autoflower outside. It's really fun to watch it. It might not be the best weed. It may get attacked by birds and squirrels and whatnot. There are probably some precautions you need to take. But if you are just considering getting started and you want something that's very low stakes, just grab a plant and put it outside.
Yeah, that's totally. That's the thing. It's like there's less of an upfront cost with outdoor growing. You just it's a container and some dirt and the fertilizer, some other supplies. But like indoors, you're looking at a higher startup cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This might be a good time also to mention, if you guys saw my first video, Spider Farmer provided the tent. It's fabulous. It included most of what we needed, but it did not include everything we needed.
No,
is that standard when people go in to buy a tent setup, to expect that one purchase isn't going to be the only purchase for their whole process?
Yes, because a true plug and play kit is going to have more equipment than some people need. And so I think, Spider Farmer's correct in their kit, they've got most of what you need. You could plant a plant in there and it could grow, but there's a couple other things that, I suggest that we add to increase our control of the environment and just to kind of level up, I would say. Absolutely.
It seems like anyone can grow weed, but to grow good weed, you really need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's the fundamentals. If you take the time to learn good fundamentals, you're going to be able to, most people will be able to grow a decent flower that they can enjoy.
This is fantastic, especially with, Chase and I both agree that the flower being sold at the dispensary, yes, there's some good flower, for sure, but there's a lot of not good flour. And I'll say it, I don't know what's exactly going into it. I don't know what processes are being used to treat the flour after the fact. So that's why I decided it was just the right time to take on this home growing project. For someone who uses cannabis daily, I just felt safer knowing where it was coming from and being able to have control over that. So if you do decide to start growing and you do want to grow indoors because of weather conditions or whatnot, you're going to have to decide where to put your grow tent. We went around my very small apartment and we had one single option because there was no outlet in the closet. So it is in my living room. And that's fabulous. For people who are at home and maybe live in something larger than one bedroom,
Sure.
what are some of the questions they need to ask themselves about where they should place the tent? And can we once again just talk about the wattage and stuff of how much electricity a tent is going to produce to make sure that you put it somewhere safe?
Sure. Yeah. So when you're looking at where to put the tent in the house, ideally it's in sort of a utility area. There's going to be, if you're growing soil, there's going to be dirt in and out of the tent. If you're growing hydro, you're going to be taking buckets of water back and forth. And so if you can put it in something like a garage or a basement, utility room, something like with a non-carpeted floor, concrete floor, near a sink and near outlets. That's really the ideal. I'll say this about the garage or the utility room, or some people try to put it in a shed. You just really want it to be a conditioned space. If you have like an unconditioned garage, you're going to be fighting that heat in the summer and fighting that cold in the winter, which is just going to increase electricity costs. And so I guess this is a good time to introduce the concept of a lung room. And so like the room the tent sits in is referred to as the lung room. It's where the tent breathes from. And so if that space is conditioned, it's going to help reduce energy costs in controlling the tent itself. So here we're perfect because, we're in the living room with the tent and you keep it low 70s. The humidity sits around 30 to 40%, which is pretty common. Some homes in certain areas can push up towards 60%, but that they really should be below 50. And so generally in a conditioned space, you're going to be 40 to 50%, which is nice. You have access to that drier air to put into your tent. So you want to consider the lung room. You want to be close to outlets. You'd like to be close to a sink, close to a drain, so that you're not, toting water and stuff across carpet, ideally. And in terms of electrical capacity, so generally in a home, there's two different strengths of like a breaker. That's the breakers where you flip it. Most people just know it because they flip it when it goes out. But there's a 15 amp, which is standard. And then in bathrooms or near sinks, sometimes there'll be like a 20 amp, and it'll have like a GFI, ground fault interrupter, which is just a safety mechanism. And so if you can find yourself close to a 20 amp GFI break, outlet, that's ideal. You can certainly run a 3x3 tent, with a bunch of equipment off of a 20 amp. If you can have access to maybe two 15s, that's good. And how you tell that is you go onto your breaker box. First, you got to find the outlet close to the proposed location, plug in your cell phone with a cell phone charger, and have a friend stand there and look at the phone. If the other person goes to the breaker box, because they're never labeled, and you basically flip one at a time, and the person hollers when the phone stops charging. That's just an easy way to identify what breaker goes where. And on that breaker, it'll either say 15 or it'll say 20.
I see, okay.
And that's your amperage.
And we're using a 15 because we had no other option, and
you
that's okay.
Because we're just doing a 2x2 with an LED light. If you're running a high pressure sodium light, 1,000 watt and a 4x4 tent, that's going to take up most of a 15 amp breaker itself. So if you're thinking 4x4 and 1,000 watts of, most people use LEDs now. HPSs are kind of old school, but generally speaking, 2x2, 3x3, 15 amp, you're okay. 4x4 or bigger, you'd like access to a 20 or maybe two 15s.
Okay.
To split it up.
And one of the interesting things that we've been doing this week, while the tent is set up, but there's nothing in it, we had a sensor in it. So we were looking at the temperature and the humidity throughout the day, how hot it got. And what's interesting that I think someone who's never grown weed would not know, I was most surprised about this, is that because the lung room determines obviously like what's the tent is going to be like, I normally have my door wide open to the balcony. However, that's not going to work with a lung room. So whatever you choose, I think that you just need to be consistent.
Yep, and it's always good to, even before you build the tent, we used, I think it's called like a Therm Pro sensor. It's something I got from, a big box hardware store. But it basically just monitors temperature and humidity with an app, and it can show you history. And so even before you start building a tent or buying a tent, buy that $20 thing from Lowe's, and then just set it up potentially in your lung room and watch it for a week.
For sure.
And see what that does.
And one final question.
Sure.
I've seen some people convert their entire garage into a grow where they actually don't use a tent.
Yep.
So does that mean that entire space becomes the lung room, or does the lung room concept not apply because
it doesn't
apply?
Yeah, right. In a full grow room, situation, if you turn a guest bedroom into a room, you put white poly on the walls, you're really losing the lung room. You just have an HVAC and an air conditioned space.
Okay.
And the grow room is kind of, I think most people, if they had the choice, if they get into this hobby, they're going to love a grow room. It's kind of what everybody wants because you can get inside it. Sometimes these smaller tents, you can't get in there. But generally starting out, most people start with a grow tent. It's easy. You don't have to drill holes in your ceiling to hang lights. It contains it. They have basins in the bottom for water spill. So most people, I would say start with the grow tent. If you love it, then you can convert your whole garage. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, this seems fantastic. So I feel like I'm making progress. I did my outdoor grow. I'm learning how to do my indoor in the tent, and then check back in like a year from now and my whole house will be a grow room. Just kidding.
Yeah. Maybe.
Fantastic. Okay, so Chase and I will continue to build the tent to get everything ready, but we're also going to take this time to ask specific questions to make sure that we're covering all our bases before we just show you guys what to do. So again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. We'll have a separate session where Chase answers them. You can get seeds at triangleseeds.com, and you can reach out directly to Chase with questions, and we'll put his contact information in the description. Use him, he's great. So I'm excited. We are now a week into the grow endeavor. We do not have dirt or seeds. It's called soil apparently. And that is going to be our next conversation. So thank you for sticking with us, and I hope you're growing with us too.